They say the human brain has a funny way of protecting you from the truth. You can look directly at a monster and your mind will convince you it's just a shadow. For 5 years, I lived in that shadow. My name is Clara. I am a corporate tax consultant, a job that requires me to look at numbers, find the hidden anomalies, and see through people's financial lies. You would think a woman who gets paid to spot deception for a living would notice it in her own home. But I didn't. I was blinded by what I thought was a perfect life. My husband David was a charming, ambitious man who ran a boutique marketing agency. We met in college, struggled through our early 20s together, and finally made it, or so I thought. When his agency was on the brink of bankruptcy 3 years ago, I used my own savings, my credit, and my expertise to restructure his business, saving him from total ruin. I was his biggest investor, his wife, and his silent partner. And then there was Chloe. Chloe had been my best friend since high school. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. When she went through a bad breakup and lost her apartment, I didn't hesitate. I told David we had to let her stay in our guest room. I cooked for her. I comforted her. I treated her like a sister. I thought I was surrounded by love. In reality, I was sleeping under the same roof as two parasites who were slowly draining my life. The realization didn't come with a dramatic confession. It came on a random Tuesday night. David was supposedly at a late-night networking event, and Chloe had gone out for drinks with co-workers. I was home alone, working late on a client's tax audit. Around 1 a.m., I heard the front door click open. I walked out of my home office to greet them, thinking they had run into each other outside. They hadn't seen me. They were in the hallway, whispering, but it wasn't the kind of whispering roommates do. David's hand was resting firmly on the small of Chloe's back, sliding lower. Chloe giggled, a high-pitched, mocking sound I had never heard from her before. "Careful," Chloe whispered, leaning her head onto his shoulder. "Clara's office light is off, but she might be awake." "Don't worry about Clara," David replied, his voice laced with a cold contempt that made my blood run instantly cold. "She's probably passed out over her spreadsheets. She's too boring to notice anything anyway. Just go upstairs. I'll be there in 5 minutes." I stepped back into the shadows of my office, my heart hammering against my ribs so loudly I thought they would hear it. My hands were shaking, but my mind, the analytical, calculating part of my brain that handles millions of dollars in corporate fraud, suddenly went dead silent. I didn't scream. I didn't storm out. I sat down at my desk, covered my mouth to muffle my breathing, and listened to the footsteps heading upstairs to the guest room. Every step felt like a nail being driven into my coffin. But as I sat there in the dark, the sadness withered away and something else took its place. Pure, unadulterated rage. But I knew one thing: anger without a plan is just self-destruction. I needed to be patient. I needed to be precise. The next morning, I woke up before both of them. I made coffee, put on my regular corporate attire, and acted completely normal. When David came downstairs, he kissed my cheek. It took every ounce of my willpower not to drive my pen into his throat. When Chloe came down, wearing one of my old t-shirts, she smiled and thanked me for the coffee. I smiled back. "You look tired, sweetie," Chloe said, pouring herself a cup. "Are you working too hard?" "Just balancing some books," I replied smoothly. "You know me. I like to make sure everything adds up perfectly." As soon as I left the house, I didn't go to my corporate office. I drove straight to the office of Sarah Jenkins, the most ruthless, terrifying divorce attorney in the state. She was a woman who specialized in asset division and making unfaithful spouses wish they had never been born. I laid out the situation. Sarah looked at me with sharp, calculating eyes. "Do you want to hurt him, Clara? Or do you want to ruin him?" she asked. "I want everything," I said, my voice steady. "I want the house. I want his business. I want him to regret the day he ever thought I was too boring to notice." Sarah smiled. "Then we need evidence. In our state, infidelity can heavily influence spousal support and asset distribution if we can prove he spent marital assets on the mistress. But more importantly, we need to look at his business." That was my cue. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the role of the clueless, adoring housewife. Every night, while David and Chloe thought they were being incredibly sneaky, sending disappearing messages on Signal and meeting at cheap motels during David's business lunches. I was doing some digital archaeology. Since I had set up the financial structure of David's marketing agency, I still had administrative access to his business accounts and digital forensic tools. I began to dig. What I found was better than any text message confession. David wasn't just cheating on me emotionally, he was cheating on me financially. He had been using the business credit cards to pay for Chloe's expensive gifts, her rented car, and even hotel rooms for their weekend getaways while I was away visiting my parents. Worse for him, he had been underreporting his agency's revenue to our personal joint accounts, funneling cash into a separate private account he thought I didn't know about. He was preparing to dump me and leave me with nothing, using the money I had helped him make to start a new life with Chloe. I downloaded every bank statement. I screenshotted every fraudulent expense report. I cross-referenced the dates of his business trips with the hotel receipts under Chloe's name. But I didn't stop there. I went into our home router settings and cloned his old phone backup that was connected to our home Wi-Fi. I recovered months of deleted text messages between them. The messages were vile. They joked about my appearance. They laughed about how hard I worked just so they could enjoy the fruits of my labor. David told Chloe that as soon as the current big contract with his main client was signed, he would file for divorce, claim the business was failing, so he wouldn't have to pay me a dime, and move her into our house. They thought they were masterminds. They had no idea they were handing me the rope to hang them with. The trap was set. It was a Friday evening. David's agency was celebrating its biggest milestone yet, signing a massive multi-year retainer with their anchor client, a regional tech conglomerate worth millions. To celebrate, David organized a formal dinner party at a high-end restaurant downtown. He invited his entire staff, his main clients, his parents, and of course, Chloe was there as my plus one. David was in his element. He stood at the head of the long banquet table, holding a glass of champagne, wearing a custom suit I had bought him for his birthday. "I want to thank everyone in this room," David said, beaming with arrogance. "Success isn't built alone. It takes vision, it takes risk, and it takes the right people by your side." He looked at me and raised his glass. "To my beautiful wife, Clara, who always keeps the home fires burning while I build the empire." The table clapped. Chloe caught my eye from across the table and gave me a sympathetic, patronizing little wave. I stood up, holding my own glass. "If I may," I said, smiling warmly. I prepared a little surprise for David to celebrate this incredible milestone, a walk down memory lane, to show just how far this business has come. David looked surprised but delighted. "Oh, Clara, you didn't have to." "I really did," I insisted. I nodded to the restaurant's event coordinator, whom I had paid $500 earlier that afternoon to plug a specific USB drive into the dining room's large presentation screen. The lights dimmed. David turned toward the screen, expecting a slideshow of his company's early days. Instead, the screen illuminated with a giant high-resolution screenshot of a text message exchange. "David, Clara is staying late at the office again tonight. The idiot thinks I'm at a client dinner. Come to our bed. The sheets smell like her, but it'll be better with you. Chloe. Can't wait, babe. Make sure she doesn't check the business account for the Tiffany necklace you bought me." The room went dead silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the ice melting in a glass. David's smile froze. He looked like he had just swallowed shattered glass. "Clara, what is this? Is this a joke?" "Keep watching, honey," I said, my voice echoing clearly in the silent room. "It gets better." The slide transitioned. This time it wasn't text messages. It was a comprehensive financial ledger detailing David's embezzlement from his own company, cross-referenced with hotel booking receipts, explicit photos they had sent each other, and a detailed list of every dollar of a corporate funds spent on Chloe, including the serial number of the Tiffany necklace she was currently wearing around her neck. The representative from the tech conglomerate, the anchor client David had just signed, stood up. His face was pure thunder. He looked at the ledger, then at David. "David, is this your company's financial transparency? Are we auditing your mistress's hotel bills now?" Chloe looked around the room, realizing everyone was staring at her with utter disgust. She began to cry, covering her face. "I won't shut it off," I said, stepping forward. I placed a thick manila folder right next to David's champagne glass. "These are the divorce papers. You've been served. And by the way, since the down payment for this restaurant was paid using corporate funds that were illegally diverted, the manager has already informed me that your credit card has been declined. The bill for tonight's party is on you. Good luck paying it." I looked at Chloe. "You wanted my life, Chloe. You can have him. But you're going to have to pay for him yourself." I picked up my purse, turned on my heel, and walked out of the restaurant. As the heavy glass doors closed behind me, I could hear David's parents screaming at him and the anchor client storming out of the room. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The weeks following the dinner party were a masterclass in total systemic collapse for David. Because I had provided the forensic financial evidence directly to his anchor client and the IRS simultaneously, his business didn't just suffer, it imploded. The tech conglomerate pulled their contract within 48 hours, citing a morality and fraud clause in their agreement. Without their revenue, and with the news of David's financial misconduct spreading through the local business community like wildfire, his other clients dropped him one by one. No one wanted to be associated with a man whose wife exposed him as a fraud in front of the city's elite. David tried to fight the divorce, but Sarah Jenkins lived up to her reputation. The judge looked at the evidence of financial dissipation, the fact that David had spent over $80,000 of marital assets on his mistress while hiding income, and ruled entirely in my favor. According to our final settlement, I was awarded the house, 80% of our liquid assets, and a judgment that forced David to buy out my share of his marketing agency at its pre-collapse valuation. To pay me, he had to liquidate his remaining assets, sell his luxury car, and take out a massive personal loan. Chloe didn't stick around to help him rebuild. The moment the money dried up and the social stigma became too heavy, she packed her bags and left town. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, she tried to move back in with her parents, but they refused to speak to her after the public scandal. She ended up working an entry-level retail job in another state, completely blacklisted from the high society circles she had tried so desperately to climb into. As for me, I sold our marital house immediately. I didn't want to live in a place stained by their betrayal. I took my share of the money, moved to a beautiful high-rise apartment in the city, and started my own independent financial consulting firm. Within a year, my business was thriving. I was making double what I made before, and for the first time in my life, every single dollar belonged to me. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought justice had been served, the book was closed, and the reckoning was over. I was wrong. True karma takes time to mature. And 3 years later, it delivered its final devastating update. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in a high-end coffee shop downtown, waiting for a meeting with a new corporate client. I was wearing a tailored designer blazer, sipping an espresso, reviewing a $1 million acquisition strategy on my tablet. I felt powerful, happy, and completely at peace with my life. The door of the coffee shop opened, and a man walked in. He was wearing a faded, slightly stained polo shirt with the logo of a local low-end digital printing shop. His hair was thinning, his posture was hunched, and he looked like he hadn't slept a full night in years. It took me a full 5 seconds to realize it was David. He looked like he had aged 15 years in the span of 3. The arrogant, sharp-dressed man from the banquet table was completely gone. In his place was a broken, exhausted ghost. He ordered a basic black coffee, counting out crumpled dollar bills from his wallet. As he turned around, his eyes met mine. He froze. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. He looked down at his clothes then at my designer jacket, my jewelry, and the luxury car key fob sitting on my table. A look of profound, crushing shame washed over his face. For a second, I thought he would turn around and run. Instead, he hesitated, then walked slowly over to my table. "Clara?" he asked, his voice raspy and devoid of any of the old confidence. "Hello, David," I said, my voice completely neutral, no anger, no malice, just the tone I use for a stranger. You look amazing," he stammered, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I see your firm is doing really well. I see your billboards downtown." "It is," I replied. We just expanded our team. What about you? Still running the agency?" A bitter, self-pitying smile crossed his lips. "No, the agency went under about 6 months after the divorce. I couldn't recover from the bad press. I had to file for personal bankruptcy last year to get out from under the debt from the lawsuit." He pointed to his shirt. "I'm just managing a print shop now. Pay is terrible, but it's all I could get." "I see," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. He stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between us like an ocean. Then his eyes welled up with tears. "Clara, I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I ruined everything. I had a woman who loved me, who supported me, who built a life with me, and I threw it away for a fantasy. Chloe left me 3 weeks after the judgment. She stole my remaining cash from the apartment and ran off with some guy she met at a club. I lost my house, my career, my reputation, everything. I think about what I did to you every single day. I am so, so sorry." I looked at him. 3 years ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. I would have wanted him to crawl and beg. But sitting there, looking at this broken man, I realized something profound. His apology didn't mean anything to me anymore, because the woman he had hurt didn't exist anymore. He hadn't just destroyed our marriage. He had forced me to evolve into a version of myself that was completely out of his league. "I appreciate the apology, David," I said calmly, "but I didn't survive your betrayal just to carry your guilt. I moved on a long time ago. You should try to do the same." My phone buzzed. My new client had arrived. A handsome, sharply dressed executive walked into the coffee shop, scanned the room, and smiled when he saw me. He walked over to our table. "Clara, wonderful to see you," the client said, completely ignoring David, assuming he was just a service worker or an acquaintance. "Wonderful to see you too, Marcus," I said, standing up. I picked up my tablet and my purse. I looked at David one last time. "Good luck with the print shop, David." He didn't say a word. He just stood there, holding his cheap paper cup, watching me walk out of his life for the second time, flanked by success, wealth, and a future he would never be a part of. As I drove away in my new car, I realized that the best kind of revenge isn't a dramatic explosion or a public humiliation. Those are just the catalysts. The true ultimate reckoning is your own unbothered monumental success. It's living a life so incredibly large that the people who betrayed you become nothing more than a tiny insignificant footnote in your story. Every betrayal has a price. David and Chloe paid theirs in full, and as for me, I finally got my happy ending. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been underestimated, lied to, or broken by the people you trusted most, remember this: the reckoning isn't just about destroying them. It's about building yourself into someone they can only look at from a distance. Don't forget to subscribe to Day of Reckoning. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts on David's fate, and hit the bell icon. New stories arrive every week. Stay strong and never miss a reckoning.